Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Got a poll out. Fox News doing this poll. Let's see. No, it wasn't Fox News. It was the Brookings Institution, which actually is a left-leaning polling outfit. Brookings Institution did a poll. Which news source do the American people trust the most? And if you guessed Fox News, you would be exactly right. Among all Americans, 25% of them said that Fox News is their most trusted news source. 23% said broadcast news. 17% said CNN. Remember CNN, for years they said the most trusted name in news. That was the deal. And now only 17% of the American people believe that it is a source of news that you can rely on, have any confidence in. Only 12% trust in public television. Only 8% think that The Daily Show with Jon Stewart is the most trustworthy source of news. And listen to this, MSNBC came in with 5%. Just 5% of the American people trust MSNBC. And, you know, Jeff led the audio tease of the program today was Chris Matthews over and over again talking about how Ted Cruz is the head of the hate wing. He's the leader of the hate wing of the Republican Party. And again, just name calling is the first refuge of a man without an argument. If you cannot defeat a man, if you don't have a principled way to refute his argument, you just start calling him names and try to shut him down in that way. And that's the reason why nobody trusts MSNBC. And it's the reason why people turn to Fox News, because they believe, in general, they try to be fair and they try to be even-handed. It's why you listen to Focal Point. You trust us. It's why you listen to AFR Talk. And we try to be careful every day to be worthy of your trust. I do the research. I try to make sure that everything I bring to you is grounded in the Scriptures. It's grounded in the Constitution. It's grounded in history. It's grounded in reliable reporting so it can be confirmed. It's trustworthy. I'm not going to make stuff up on the fly. I'm not going to bring stuff to you that I haven't verified because I want you to be able to trust this voice and lean on this voice. That's what we want here at American Family Radio in general. We want to be your most trusted source of information and perspective. And see, we're going to bring you a perspective that you're not going to be able to get at a place like Fox News, because they will not bring an explicitly biblical worldview into the way they analyze what goes on around the world. So here you can get an unfiltered approach to looking at contemporary life that is filtered unapologetically and clearly through the grid of the Word of God. Now, you might even disagree with me about this, so maybe we can take some calls on this. But the Supreme Court is getting ready to hear a big case. In fact, I'm reading some articles saying that this is the biggest religious liberty case coming up in the next year's Supreme Court term. Apparently, they've agreed to hear this case. It's a case called Holt v. Hobbs. Now, the essence of this case is it involves a Muslim who is incarcerated for life. He was convicted of burglary and domestic battery. So he's in prison for the rest of his life. Now, he's arguing that his Islamic faith requires him to be able to grow a beard. And prison regulations say no beard, can't grow a beard in prison. And so he is making a First Amendment claim, free exercise of religion. I have a right to grow my beard in prison. Now, there are two problems with this that I want to touch on, some of which I have addressed before, been controversial, as you are probably aware. But number one, I think it's important that we take a sober look at what the Founding Fathers were trying to do with the First Amendment. And it's very, very clear that what they were trying to do was to protect liberty for the free exercise of the Christian religion. Now, it wasn't that they were trying to shut down other religions. That wasn't the case at all. They just weren't talking about them at all. They weren't making decisions with regard to Hinduism or with regard to Mohammedanism or with regard to Judaism. They weren't even dealing with those issues. That's what Joseph Story said. Longest-serving Associate Justice, wrote the first definitive history of the Constitution. He said, look, the entire aim of the First Amendment It wasn't to advance Mohammedanism. It wasn't to advance Hinduism. It wasn't to advance Judaism. The entire purpose, we weren't even thinking about that, or the founders were not even thinking about that. It wasn't to advance, let alone countenance. Weren't even facing it, weren't even dealing with it. But the purpose was to exclude rivalry among all the various Christian denominations by eliminating the possibility that any one of those Christian denominations could become the national church, the national denomination. So Congress was explicitly prohibited from picking one Christian church, one Christian denomination, and making it the official church of the United States, compelling people to support it with their tax dollars. The founders said, nope, not going to do that. What they were doing is leaving that issue entirely to the states. And even Justice Potter Stewart said this back in the 50s, that the whole purpose of the First Amendment on the part of the founders was to tie the hands of Congress. Congress shall make no law regarding establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It was to tie the hands of Congress and leave the issue of religious expression entirely in the hands of the states. So the states were allowed by our Constitution to do whatever they wanted when it came to religious expression. If they wanted to have an established church, if a state wanted to pick one Christian denomination and make it the official church of that state and make people pay taxes to support its pastors, they could do it. And at least 6 of them did. And maybe up to 9 or as many as 10 had some kind of establishment provision in place. Some of them was just generally established Christianity. We'll collect taxes and we'll give it to all, we'll distribute it to all the Christian pastors in our state. Now, by 1833, all of those establishments were gone, and I think that's a good idea. I think an established church is a bad idea at any level, and the states all came to see that. You know, churches should be supported by the voluntary contributions of people who receive spiritual ministry there. Shouldn't be a matter of being taxed in order to keep them afloat. But anyway, that was the whole purpose of the First Amendment. So number one, a Muslim really does not have a claim under the First Amendment. Now, he may have a claim under the amendment of the state, under the Constitution of the state in which he lives, but that's up to the state. That's entirely a matter for the states to decide. If they want to make Islam, a state could make Islam the state religion, the established religion of their state. They could do that under the Constitution. That's reserved for them. But it also means if they want to prohibit, for instance, the building of mosques in their state, they can do that. Had this big issue in Tennessee with a mosque outside Murfreesboro. Supreme Court said, no, you can't stop them from building a mosque. So the Supreme Court, trashing the Constitution, which reserved that issue explicitly and exclusively for the individual states. That was not there for the federal government to decide, none of their business. Now, so this guy that's a prisoner, he's a Muslim, and he's trying to make a claim on the First Amendment, and we would have to say no, he doesn't have a First Amendment claim. Now, there may be other reasons why we would want to allow him to have what he wants. You know, if it doesn't represent any kind of a threat to the stability and the order of the running of the prison system, if it's not going to represent a disruption to the standards and what we're trying to do here, if it's not going to be an interference with what other prisoners are allowed to do, maybe we could allow him to do this or that or the other thing. But the point is he doesn't have a constitutional claim to grow a beard. Now, here's the second thing. When you wind up in prison, one of the consequences of that is that you have forfeited your constitutional rights. Now, remember that Amendment 5 says this, that no person may be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That's very, very important to understand that, because this guy has been deprived of liberty, correct? He's locked up. He's behind bars. He's not free to go to Jack in the Box or go out to McDonald's or go to the roller rink. He's stuck in a prison. Why? Because he's guilty of assault, burglary, domestic battery. He's been tried, found guilty, and locked up. You can forfeit your constitutional right to liberty if due process finds you guilty of criminal behavior. So what that means is, these are the most profound constitutional rights that we have: life, liberty, and property. Now, what the Constitution says, Amendment 5, says these precious rights, you can forfeit these. You can forfeit those rights if you are guilty of a crime and you're found guilty according to due process. In other words, the right process is followed. You got your day in court. You knew what the charges were against you. You had access to attorney to defend you. You got to face your accusers in open court. You were able to receive a trial by a jury of your peers. And then if after all of that they find you guilty and lock you up, then they have the right to do that. You don't have a constitutional right to liberty at that point. So here's my point with this, and that's why it's a little bit disappointing to me to look at the number of Christian organizations that have jumped on board this guy's case. And this is where I'm sort of an outlier on this thing. But the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty is going to bat for this Muslim guy. The Alliance Defending Freedom is doing this. The ACLU, it's interesting, is doing this. Prison Fellowship, Chuck Colson's outfit. Christian Legal Society, Catholic Bishops, the Southern Baptist Convention, Anti-Defamation League, even Americans United for the Separation of Church and State are going to bat for this guy. And I frankly think that is a mistake. I think one of the things we realize is that if due process is followed, somebody commits a crime for which they can be incarcerated, they have forfeited their constitutional rights when they do that. Now, we're still going to have humane procedures and all that. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying this is an excuse for us to treat prisoners in a way that's barbaric, but what I'm saying is this Muslim or a Christian, even a Christian in the same circumstances, has no right to grow a beard on the basis of his constitutional right to the free exercise of religion. He forfeited that when he committed a crime and was convicted of that crime. If he wants to exercise his constitutional right to the free exercise of religion, then he needs to wait till his time is served and he can be released. Then he regains the constitutional right to both liberty and the free exercise of religion. Until that time, he simply has no complaint. So anyway, you might disagree with me. We'll open up the phones here, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Talk about rebuilding Muslim nations, cops in Utah, and we'll talk about what you think about Muslims in prison and their constitutional rights to a beard.
At My Family